Ron, welcome to the Way of Champions podcast. Jerry and I are super honored that you can join us today.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, well, I know Jerry's been trying to get you on here for a while, and I guess I'll get us started. It was actually like 2 days ago. I was listening to ESPN on their podcast. They have a new series called March 11th, 2020. And that was the day that Rudy Gobert tested positive and the NBA suspended the last season. And we're catching you here today, just back from a road trip with the Warriors to Detroit. So how are things in the NBA these days with everything that's going on in the world?
Well, the NBA is running a pretty tight ship. And we just got off a 10-day road trip. We spent 4.5 days in New York. New York has some really strict protocols. You cannot have team meals in a hotel, and you can't have gatherings in a hotel. So essentially, your life on the road exists between spending time in your room, which allows you to take a mask off, which is really helpful to live normally, and then going to the venue to practice or play. In New York, we contracted some food vans for that parked along one avenue, and guys could go down, or you could order room service. Those were the two options. So, but you adjust, you work around. It's like anything else. Something comes up today after we finish this podcast, and John, you're going to have to adjust to it. It might be a surprising event, but you adjust and you move on.
Yeah, I mean, Jerry and I have talked constantly, as you know, between you guys and his work with one of the Major League Soccer teams and my friends who coach in that league, and one of my friends coaches for a team that got to the soccer bubble in Orlando, had a positive test on day one, was locked in their hotel rooms for 11 days and sent home without playing a game or practicing. And it's just a different world right now. And even professional sports, it's just, you have your bubble, but then we have families, we have children, we have kids in school, we have loved ones, and it's really hard to keep it.
Really, it's interesting. This is the first time I've traveled for a while on this trip, and seeing how the pandemic has affected the major cities is, it's sobering.
Good time to learn about detachment and impermanence. So many of us function in sports as if things are going to last forever, and we get so attached to things like winning and losing and championships and stuff like that. The COVID shows up and said, hey, you guys got to learn some things here. You got to start to understand what life is all about. And so it's an opportunity. And as coaches, we're in a prime position to impact that kind of thought process,
Nature has a way of doing that to us, slapping us around. And
it's our mother.
Hopefully with the horror of this pandemic, we can come out of it with a better idea of how we fit into our universe and our earth. Maybe have that.
Yeah, great comment. Yeah.
Areas, so hopefully.
Yeah.
Well, Ron, you've had an amazing journey, an amazing career. As I was getting to know more about you, getting ready for this podcast and looking at your coaching journey as a head coach, as an assistant coach under, some household names, Jerry Charkanian, George Karl, Brad Stevens for a year, and now for the last, I guess this is your 6th year with Steve Kerr. What's that been like? What's your journey been like? And maybe just tell our listeners a little bit about your decades in the game here.
Well, I think my journey has been circuitous. Started in small college and then moved along. I think I've had a chance to work with a lot of really good coaches, not only the head coaches you mentioned, but many good assistant coaches, Terry Stotts, and I could go down the list of so many good people, skilled people. You learn from each person you work for in terms of a head coach. You also impart things to that person. Not, I think, anything that is perhaps earth-shattering, other than maybe organizing them better, doing a great job of teaching for them, working behind the scenes to make things work when things can fray. That's kind of been my journey. I consider myself very lucky to have had a job for so long. I always go back to what Abe Lemons said when he was asked about what's your definition, Abe, of a good coach? And he says, a good coach is someone who has a job. And yeah, Abe was one of the great comedians and humorists of our coaching fraternity, but that's such a true statement.
Mm-hmm.
And, so that's kind of been my journey in a nutshell.
Yeah. What do you think is, and then I'll let Jerry jump in here. What do you think is when you think of like great coaching, what's the quality or couple qualities that pop out on top for you as this separates the good coaches from the great ones, besides being employed?
Well, that's kind of an interesting question, but I've worked for coaches who, have a pretty good basketball knowledge. I've worked for coaches who have a great basketball knowledge. I've worked for coaches who don't relate well to players. I've worked with coaches who relate better to players. And I must tell you, sitting here at 73 years of age, after 52, 53 years of this, that there is no formula.
Mm.
We all look great when we have talent. And I think what people forget about sport is sometimes your best work is done with not the most talented team.
Mm.
When you have the luck to be with a talented team, then, Pandora's box opens for you,
Mm-hmm.
and the possibilities become much greater for, achievement.
Mm-hmm.
But everyone is different. I would say this, though. I think that at the core, what we do in basketball or any other sport, in the old days at least, is we were educators, we're teachers. And if you can keep the game simple, it becomes sophisticated. If you can't keep it simple, if you do not have a format, a foundational approach to it, the game can get dicey. So it's really interesting in most anything. The great experts in any area, they've mastered the fundamentals, they keep it simple, and hopefully they have these great athletes around them to bring the goals of a team to fruition.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Chair?
The thing that, Ron, strikes me about that is so much of our society is judging coaches, teams, athletes based on outcome results, winning, losing, points scored, assists made. And, but John and I really, we work in an area where we're trying to help people understand that outcomes and results are A, not controllable, and B, there's something more to sport than just an outcome or result. And what an amazing opportunity to teach through sport what life is all about. I mean, does that sort of strike a note in your way?
Yes, because it's actually more pronounced now, that whole equation of teaching and helping and relating and thinking through things in perhaps a more realistic way than before the pandemic. Everyone's been affected by this. I think it's interesting. We played with great joy last night at Detroit. Eric Pascal after the game said, "Yeah, we played well, but we played with joy. It was fun out there." And a lot of people are looking for fun things,
right?
Including pro athletes, right? I mean, this has affected everyone. It's not just affected the millions and millions of people who don't have the wherewithal to combat this by through living conditions or whatever it might be. So I see it now, this paying attention to the immediate, living in the moment. And then the camaraderie of the group is interesting because it's fun to be around people again. We're social creatures, and it's fun to be around people again. It's actually fun to see you two people, because this is what our interactions have come down to, right? I mean, but it's fun seeing you two guys today, and that for that very reason. I don't know if I answered your question, Jerry, but
no, there's no answer. I'm just curious. You reflected on it, and I love what you said, because I think a lot of people out there think somehow, oh, NBA, yeah, Warriors, wow, no, these are human beings, and human beings don't want to be human doings, and human beings crave connection and caring and joy and camaraderie. And really, that to me is what my question was all about, because win or lose, even in the losses that you had, there was no joy. From my perspective, you're in the middle of the whole thing, but I'm looking at it from a joy perspective. I know the values that you guys cherish, and as do John and I. And when you're having fun, good things happen, and life makes sense,
Well, when good things aren't happening, it's not very joyful at the moment. We had to open the season against two really good teams. But you work through that, and you understand, as you like to point out, Jerry, it's not permanent. You always wake up the next day and there'll be another game, and then you go from there.
Well, what's interesting about that too, Ron, is that you sort of you can play your way to a better team by having that run of games where, okay, maybe our opponents aren't as strong, but we win a few, and then you start to believe, and then there's more joy, and then there's more freedom. Because I think in sports, sort of the opposite of joy is fear, right? And when you're fear, you're tight, you're tentative. So yeah,
I think there's a lot of fear though too, because simply there are a lot of trolls out there. There are a lot of judgmental people. We've gotten, every year it seems like we get more critical of not only people in sport, but anyone trying to do a job. There's a lot of tough jobs out there. And if you're Steph Curry, putting in 25 to 30 points a game, it's not easy. There's pressure. When you don't do it, someone comes to you and says, hey, what happened? And it's really interesting how sports fans actually view athletes as something more than human beings. Like they're these machines. And as both of you know, you'll wake up, whatever the sport you do or whatever activity you do, you'll wake up one day, like I like playing tennis, and God, the game is so great and the ball's coming off my racket. Then the next day it's not. It's tough. I don't have a backhand, or I can't hit my forehand volley, whatever it might be. These guys are highly, highly athletic, skilled people, but they're just human beings. And, that's what makes it tougher. And I think that's what brings out this fear factor in a lot of guys.
Yeah. I mean, you see it, right? Of like that fear of social, like what's happening on Twitter about me right now when I'm having a bad game, and then that, like, that next time, am I still not afraid to take that next shot and keep going? But even though I know it's going to be ugly, and I've spoken to agents of professional players these days where they say, 20 years ago that was never anything, right? But now your brand, what people are saying about you online, is such a massive influence on your focus, your time that you have during the day, all that sort of stuff. It's really different now.
It makes coaching very challenging, more so than it ever has been. We have guys at halftime, when I think Jerry and I talked about this we had a really long and great conversation a while back, but I think maybe we touched on this, but we come in at halftime and to address the team, and everyone is looking down, they're reading their phones. And many times they're reading about the game, about the first half of the game.
Yeah. How many points I have, maybe?
I think we lost Ron for a second there. He just froze up.
That hasn't happened at all.
Yeah, it's okay. We can edit it out
It's a good flow.
if he makes it back.
Come back, Ron. Come back. It was a good flow. He was into a good rhythm.
Is that your phone dinging?
Yeah, is it loud?
Yeah.
I got to get rid of it.
Is he calling you?
Well, I have a son who's not doing well, and I wanted to be close to him.
So he signed
Danny's
off.
having a tough day.
He signed off, so hopefully he'll sign back on here.
But yeah, I like this flow. But I want to start hitting his forte of 23 years in the NBA as an assistant coach, and people are saying, "What's wrong with that guy? Can't he make head coach?"
Yeah.
You know, when indeed he's chosen to be an assistant. Very attractive. Do you have to send him another something?
No, it should be the same thing.
This is not a problem.
You just turn your phone off? Did you?
I put it outside the room. I took it outside the room.
Just in case he's calling you or something, because he doesn't have my number.
Boy. One of these days. Everything okay, Ron? I got that.
That's the email. Do you have his phone, like his text, or no? Huh.
Did you see where yesterday Steph Curry sank 134 straight three-pointers?
Yeah, it was crazy.
I mean, come on.
That was nuts.
Jesus. People don't even do that with foul shots.
Yeah. Let me pause this record. So go ahead.
So, for example, at halftime, we'll come in to speak with the team, and everyone's looking down at their phones, and they're reading about the first or half of the game. And of course, there's a lot of criticism, a lot of trolling, and so on. And so, just to illustrate how difficult it is now to coach, I think, given social media, is now the coach has to come in and be constructively critical and be positive and be helpful, and tie the bow around the package that needs to be delivered the second half. And it just makes it more difficult. Mm-hmm. And as Jerry knows, and John, it's, criticism has changed over the course of time. In athletics, you have to do a lot of positive stuff before you can get to the kernel that you need to, deliver. Mm-hmm. But I think it just makes it more difficult mm-hmm. to actually coach the game and actually to lead also.
And one of the things about social media is that it puts everyone on that same platform, right? Like 15 years ago, if you were on the news criticizing someone or criticizing foreign policy or whatever, we just assumed you had a PhD and actual 30 years of experience. But now the Twitter platform gives your voice sometimes the same as the coach in your ear at halftime, right? Yeah, it's hard. Jerry, I know you want to kind of switch gears here because we really want to get into, Ron, all the years you spent in the NBA, all these amazing years you've done, especially as an assistant coach, because we have lots of assistant coaches who listen to this, and it's such a unique skill set as well. But Jared, did you have a question on that?
Well, of course, Ron, I think you've been 23 years, I believe, or am I correct, in the NBA?
Closer to 30, Jerry.
Closer to 30 years.
Jerry was an English major, not a math major.
Yeah, I got to get these numbers down. I'm with numbers guys.
I just assume
I'll communicate when you
good in every area. I just assume he's good.
I'll teach you some communication here in a minute. Hold on. It's so easy for people to look at someone like you, Ron, and say, you know, what's wrong with that guy? You know, I mean, 30 years in the NBA and he's still an assistant. I mean, what the hell's with that? You know, when indeed, knowing you as I do, you love your position. This is your calling. Your calling is to be, as Steve Kerr brilliantly label you, among other things, is the truth teller. And I think you talk about how wonderful it is to be there to fill the cracks, you know, with concrete. And talk a little bit about that, because I know there are a lot of assistant coaches out there that feel like failures because they're not becoming a head coach.
Well, if you have a good job, you should never feel like a failure.
Great point.
Sometimes, Jerry, and you outlined this so well. I've been reading your book, and you outline it so well, and that is, it's kind of been my philosophy. I don't know if it's completely how you say it, but you kind of do your job. You know, you do your job, and the rest kind of happens. Now, you can be overly aggressive in trying to seek a head job. Many people can be disingenuous, not only in sport, obviously in any occupation. The whole idea of apprenticing is kind of thrown out the window nowadays. But you know, it takes special skills to be a head coach in this league. And I don't know if one of the skills is truth telling, to be honest with you. There's a lot of compromise, and you have to work well with not only your upper management, but ownership. There's just a lot of moving parts. And, you know, I think the course I took, the way I worked for any given group, any given team in the NBA, maybe didn't lend itself to my advancing to that position. But I also believe that people recognize that in you. And, you know, it has to happen at a certain time period too. And I think I passed that window. I don't lose any sleep about it. Excuse me. Because I think what I've done, I feel good about. You know, the teams I've been with, the growth of the teams, I think that's the most important thing in my teaching and my coaching and so on. And so I look back with, you know, a bit of pride at all the stops I've been in.
You know, you're a man of faith, and I'm familiar with your connection with sojourners, if I might say that, and how important that is. And one of the things that comes to mind as a young Catholic boy growing up in Brooklyn, New York, is the phrase, "Those who are last will be first." I don't know what part of the Bible that comes from, but those who will be last will be first, which means you've got to have a little bit of humility, which I detect in you immediately the first time we met. sort of a humbleness, but yet at the same time, a lot of people are thinking like, head coach is where you need to go and what, blah, 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 and that whole narrative. But you've been voted, I heard that the general managers of the NBA and all the teams have voted you for 3 consecutive years the best assistant coach in the NBA. And so, you're getting that recognition, which is really nice, and you're really enjoying your position. But there's a lot of people out there that can't understand that you take the work you're given and you make the best of it and you be the best version of yourself. I don't know if I'm making any sense with this, but
No, I think that's true. I mean, I don't know about the first shall be last, because I've always had a good
last
job.
shall be first. Did I say the first shall be last? No.
I've always had a pretty good job, so I don't think of it that way. But I do like the adage that many are called and few are chosen.
Mm-hmm.
And there's 30 NBA jobs, and it's a league that absorbs very well its ex-players. And many of these guys are highly skilled. They know the game after playing it for so long. And I think most of them have made really good coaches.
Mm-hmm.
That's the nature of the league. That's just how it is. But
if I'm going to be an assistant coach, what are the top the one of a number? What are the top 3 or just one even characteristics that is really like makes the assistant coach very effective and very good at what they do? What is that?
Well, it's something that I've told a number of head coaches coming from college to the pros, and not as head coaches, but as maybe assistants again. And that is, what are your ego needs? What are your ego needs?
Check your ego at the door. Is that what it is?
Well, it's a nice way to operate, but that isn't probably the path that many people choose or are compelled towards. But you have to take this into consideration, because it's a melding of you into a group, more so than college even. Yeah. And so you have to be ready for that. But as far as if you're asking like these benchmark things that have motivated me, I think I'll get back to this, improvement of a team, of an individual. And so you either improve at this level and flourish, or you don't. And lack of improvement usually means a certain failure, a level of failure that, we'd like a team or an individual certainly to avoid. And then I think you have to be an educator. You have to be a teacher in an assistant's role. And actually my role this year is I'm off the front of the bench. My role has changed and I'm kind of developing it. But I have a really fun time with the players this year, because I come at them in a different way. And I have a good rapport with all of our guys, and that's been really rewarding. That's harder to do. Like I've directed stuff, defense, especially over the years, and you're so caught up with this, it takes a different amount of energy. And then also you're scouting on top of that, and you're doing this and that and the other thing. And it's a real full boat. Well, my boat isn't too full. And so I kind of pick and choose, and this has been a very delightful part of it. Wow. Having said that, this is a vital part of what an assistant coach does. And that is, you're the cement, you fill in, you teach, you exhort, you praise, and you try to be really honest, because I find all of the guys caught into that. They want to get better. They don't want to hear someone's BS. They want to hear, I think, the truth as it. It's only one person's take on it, right? And so you build up a credibility, you build up a confidence with a person, and then you're able to help them. But that's really the core of
so it's like the relationship game is really, sum it up in a word, relationships.
without question. This is completely a people sport. And I've been amazed over the years the number of people I have met who are not people persons,
Mhm.
and they're in coaching. You know,
Mhm.
it doesn't work. This is just human beings. It's group dynamics. It's people coming together.
But I think the other interesting part of it, and having served as an NCAA assistant coach, I think is your own self-awareness, and then your ability to look at maybe the head coach or the other people on the staff, and like you said, fill the cracks. Like, what does this group need? If we look at the whole, right, here's the brilliant, maybe the head coach is the brilliant tactician, but not a great people person. I have to be the one there having the quiet word, putting the arm around the person, noticing who's down. And with other people, some head coaches, that's their greatest strength. And then, like you said, you have to be the tactical person. And that, I think, is, I think what you said there is perfect. A great assistant coach looks at what are the cracks that are not being filled by the head coach, the rest of the staff, and they fill those in. I think it's just a great analogy.
It's, yeah, I would compare it. It's a little bit of a negative analogy, but I think it works in sport. And that is, you're a fireman. There are these small little smoldering embers, and sometimes a little bit bigger conflagration, and maybe a tiny fire here, and you're just looking to address and mitigate and bring people together and take a load off your head coach, for sure. In many cases, I worked for coaches who kind of light the fires. And
Mm-hmm.
so your job is really a fireman.
Mm-hmm.
And that's more in the past than currently, because things have changed in that regard in terms of the dynamics of a team.
Mm-hmm. What do you do? How do you navigate those times when maybe you and the head coach disagree on something? Because this happens, right? You see a player's role differently, or what we should do in this situation differently. How have you best seen that work? Because I'm sure you've seen it. I'm sure you've seen it blow up publicly, which it probably shouldn't, and I'm sure you've seen been part of great staffs where,
Mhm.
hey, we deal with it behind the scenes and we present a united front.
Well, whatever's decided, you go out and do it. If you're talking about a strategy, uh, going into a game, or perhaps a philosophy going into a season of how you're going to do something. And then I've always bought in on that, knowing what I think could be successful, and knowing perhaps that we're going to get to that point at some time, but you're not going to get to that point early, and you let things evolve.
Mm-hmm.
A more critical area is relating with players. There are many things, if you are a pure-hearted assistant coach, you want the best for your head coach, for your program, that you have conversations with a player that are starkly honest, and they're not to be shared. These conversations are not to be shared. Many people always want to take something up to the head coach because now they think they can maybe get a pat on the back because of, or some player who's a little bit, not fitting the role that the head coach wants or something. It's always easy for an assistant coach to, kind of throw gasoline on that situation. You have to avoid all of that, and you have to build these dialogues and this confidence with players. I'll give you a classic example of it. A wonderful kid we had, James McAdoo from the University of North Carolina, during our first two championship seasons, or one of them was a championship season, the first two seasons. He's playing in Japan right now. Marvelous kid. James was a good player. He was supposed to be a first round pick coming out of North Carolina, top 10, stayed in school and dropped. And came to us, worked extremely hard, made himself a serviceable NBA player, helped us along the way, and so on in many games. We had a discussion around December about his not playing. And I said, James, I said, if you looked at our roster, we got a, I said, do you expect me to go up to Steve Kerr and present an argument for you that you should be playing more minutes on this team? I said, I can't do that because that's not going to happen. But I said, here's what's going to happen. You're going to keep working and you're going to find a window that's going to allow you to do what you're wanting to do, right? And it happened for him, and especially against Houston, which was one of our rivals. He played great against Houston every time we played Houston, played well against Houston in playoffs. So it happened for him. But this is the kind of stuff that comes up all the time. And these are hard conversations because everyone wants to be successful, obviously. You know, this is after having worked with athletes and so on. I'll drop that right there. I'm talking too much.
No, it's great. You're here to talk.
Well, we're all ears. I mean, I'm learning so much right now.
Hey, Jerry, you had sent me when Jerry and I were researching this. Jerry, you had sent me a great Kevin Durant quote about why he came to the Warriors. Maybe this is a good time for you to ask that one.
Yeah, and you know, I this might not even be accurate. What I was reading, I know I was reading these words, but I just wanted to clarify it with you, Ron, because it's really mysterious to me that KD, when he was talking after he was with the Warriors, he said the only reason I came to Golden State was Ron Adams. Simple as that. End of quote. Simple as that. That's the reason. That is, to me, that's an amazing, if true, an amazing affirmation from an awesome athlete and an honorable person. What did his comment, is this true? And what did his comment mean to you? And maybe you could talk a little bit about your relationship with KD. I think that would be really fun for our listeners.
Well, he did make that statement, and there was a small modicum of truth to it. There was, as with everything, there's a greater truth. And we had a really good time together at Oklahoma City when I coached him there. He was a young player. And I think me being at Golden State was a bit of a comfort to KD, but there was a huge recruitment process on the part of, 5 or 6 of our guys to get KD to come here. Bob Myers did a marvelous job of it. Also,
that was out at the Hamptons, wasn't it, out in Long Island? Yeah.
And so I was amused by his comment. I mean, it felt good, obviously, when he said that, but there's always this context, and I was a very, very small part of that. But I do, again, I would say that he knows me. He felt good about coming here. There was someone that he knew, and I remember I was back in. We were having summer league practices, I think, in Santa Cruz, your stomping grounds.
Yeah.
And Bob Myers called me, and I was flabbergasted that we were getting KD. I was really, really excited. And he says, "You better get down here to the press conference. I think it'd be good if you'd be here." So I drove back down, and so that's kind of how it transpired.
And then when you heard that comment, you were like, "I think I deserve a raise at this point." Like,
not in the least. Not in the least.
They said, "You see the contract we just gave him? No chance." Yeah.
Because I knew the content. I knew the content of it.
Here's a question that Jerry and I get often from coaches or maybe head coaches within a club or a school that's not a good fit, or an assistant coach working in a program where they are feeling ready to move on. So, like, how do you know when it's time to move on as an assistant?
Well, before I had kids, if I had a job that I did not like, I would make that decision because of the nature of what I was in, for example, or whatever. And I would make an attempt to move.
Mm-hmm.
And, when you have a family, it's a little bit different because you have more responsibility and, you want to be careful. And the other thing is, it's a marvelous agent in the league, Ron Grinker from Cincinnati, Ohio, and represented a lot of great people, but was just a special man. And Ron told me he said, Ron, I want to give you one piece of advice. And I said, what's that, Ron? And he said, get a job from a job.
Wow.
I was pretty young then. I said,
Yeah.
get a job from a job. And then, it dawned on me, yes, if you're working, that's the time to explore and move. And you've got to do it discreetly, because you can get in trouble with your own staff or whatever. But the one thing that, as an assistant coach, I've always understood this: a head coach who I work for getting fired affects me a lot more than it does that head coach. A lot more than it does the head coach. And I've been in situations in which I've been left in the lurch and really had to scramble, and that's no fun. But it is a learning experience, and it does test you, and it tests your mettle, it tests your foresight, it tests your skills to get back on your feet. And those times aren't fun, but I don't think about them much.
Yeah. I mean, I think my question is around, like, and you answered a lot of it, and I like that idea of, get a job from a job. I think it's that self-awareness, right? Of, okay, maybe I went to work for this coach to learn X, Y, and Z, and now I feel like I've gotten that from him or her, and now I'm ready to, grow, right? Or cultural fit is not there, right? If joy of the players is something that's important to me, and this is not a thing that this coach is bringing to it, it's not a good cultural fit for me. I'm not going to enjoy my coaching. And I think that's the thing, because I think a lot of coaches get scared within their job, but then it's no fun going to work, and they're not coaching because they're not developing players that they know they can, because they're not able to coach, right? Or head coaches that don't let anyone else do any coaching is a big thing. Maybe not so much in basketball as it is in other sports.
Well, I think you touched on a very basic truth, and that is, am I growing? Am I growing? Am I contributing? If you don't feel good in those two areas, jobs aren't fun. And I would say those are the two aspects that you really have to think through. Now, the other side of the fence is, I see a lot of people moving, and there's no perfect job. Sometimes you fall into one that's pretty close to perfect. I think perfect is a nice word as it comes off our lips, but I don't think it's always grounded in reality. That's not the nature of life. So you have to be a little careful with that. I'm reminded of the players in Europe. They used to start, so many good players would start in Belgium. I'd coached pro ball in Belgium, and they were kind of surprise players. They'd come over, they did great in Belgium, which is a good quality of play, but then they'd start matriculating down south to the better jobs, France, Italy at that time, and so on. And many with not great results when they did that, but they got paid more. So their concept of a better job was the financial aspect of it, which we have to look at. There's no question about that. But, know when you're in a good spot and a good place, and know that, perfection isn't always around the corner.
Yeah. To that point, I have a quote here, finding the perfect job, not by finding the perfect job, but by finding the imperfect job perfectly. So to your point, every job is imperfect. Everything in life is imperfect, but understand that you can see that and do it perfectly. You can make that choice. John, I wonder if we could just sort of circle back to a comment that we talked about before that I felt I wanted to really pursue a little more with you, Ron. And that is this idea, this term, truth teller. I mean, people have labeled you, they've given you all these, and affectionately so, Ron Adams, brilliant tactician, right? Ron Adams, developmental guru. And I know you well enough at this point in our relationship to know that you just shudder when you hear those things. Your sense of humbleness and truth to yourself as a coach tells me that you can just brush those off. But you can't brush off the importance of a moniker such as people calling you a philosopher, and the fact that that has a role in your coaching philosophically, because we're talking about perspective. And I'm wondering if you could talk about that, which then leads into perhaps my most intriguing thought about you, and that is you as a truth teller. And why is all that important? The philosophy piece that you have, being the truth teller. How can we talk about that in a way that will really help some of these younger coaches out there?
Well, we all have a philosophy of living, which can be helpful to all of us, and we expand on it. You know, we start at a certain stage and we grow, and we've talked about this, Jerry, about how we start off and, you know, I look back and say, why in the world, you know, what was wrong with me? And then you grow out of that and you keep moving forward. And the philosophical part, I have a kind of a broader philosophical mindset. I like philosophers. I like philosophy. I like poetry. I like a lot of things along those lines, which have, I think, strengthened me. And then I think as you shape your view of life, for example, let's say I'm working for you, Jerry, you're a head coach of some sort, some sport, I should say. And, you know, you're going about your business and I see cracks in your armor. All right. I see things maybe not being done. I see things being done poorly. I see bad press relations, whatever it might be. What is my response if I care about you? To say, this guy's adult, you know, look what he's doing. Or do I, in the best manner I can, confront you? All right. Now, I've worked on staffs in which there was an assistant coach trying to undermine the head coach. It's one of the most it's one of the most difficult settings because the head coach in all of his activity is oblivious to what's going on around him. And there's a real danger when you point that out, if you point it out, if you choose to point it out. That's kind of a non-touchable in some ways. But eventually you work around that and try to mitigate. But the point is, if you care about your program, if you care about your head coach, you do have to be a truth teller of sorts. Now, I'm not going to recommend this for anyone because it can get you fired. No, it can.
Yeah.
It can get you fired. But if you're working with a good human being and that person knows that you're working in their best interest, maybe it's something they don't want to hear, you approach it. I've always, Jerry, this has always come pretty easily for me. I would just say that. It's not, I don't think it's something that comes easily for a lot of people, but that has always come easily for me. That's a great
response. And it's something I would expect from you because it's reasonable. And the message is, you know, first of all, sometimes the truth cannot be told under certain circumstances. And if you're gonna tell the truth, what I'm picking up in between the lines here, you better have your communication stick down because it's how you say something. Like you could come to me, Ron, and say, Jerry, you know what? That book I just read of yours, holy crap, man, that thing is so crazy. You don't know what you're talking about, man. This is not happening. Or you could say, you know, I read your book and you know, your intention is so amazing. And I love this part of it, but it was confusing when I got to this. I'm wondering what you meant by that. Now I'm all open, you know, because I hear that you like my book, but yet on the other hand, there's something that's not working for you. And so I think for the listeners out there, you've got to be cautious, as you're saying, Ron. It could get you fired. In some cases, even if you don't get fired, it might make your life really, really tough. And but you're also working with a human being who I'm familiar with, Steve Kerr, who sends out the message that I'm a learner. I want to learn. And he's very humble, and he's very open about saying, I don't know this. And he wants you. He'll tell you, if a head coach is of the nature of a Steve Kerr, then you're going to feel more comfortable doing it. You know, John Wooden, from what I can understand, surrounded himself with people who could tell the truth. Not that he would listen to them. I mean, he would listen, but not that he would follow it, but that he wanted more input. And it's a very good role for an assistant coach. But I'm thinking, you know, maybe it's a good idea. I could be wrong here, to approach the coach and say, you know, do you care whether I tell you the truth, or do you want to have a yes man around you, and see what their response is, and get some feedback, you know?
Well, I think that's a good point. And I'm going to piggyback on it, because as you were speaking, it brought out another thought of maybe how I do this stuff. I compliment my head coach when something is done well. I compliment Steve when he addresses the team. We had a situation just the other day, and we talked about it beforehand. I challenged him a little bit on something, and Steve is a wonderful messenger. And we're doing our film session. He gets to this point. He enunciates it so well. He develops it so well, and it was really helpful for our team. And what I'm saying is that if I'm working with someone, I can't be just approaching them when things are, you know, difficult, in which I have to make a difficult statement to someone. But this is a process. And, you know, head coaches are no different from players. Who does not want to be complimented when they do something well? Right?
Yeah.
And so it's a total package of how you approach people, you know, and the respect you have for them, and being willing to say, job well done. Because I don't think a lot of people, you know, in pro sports, let's face it, you're not getting a lot of compliments from anyone. It doesn't come a little bit from your staff. You know, you're not going to necessarily get it from ownership or management, you know, in some programs.
We just had a guy named Stephen Rolnick on the podcast, and he says, you know, great coaches, and this is what you're talking. You can't just be a deficit detective, is his words, right? You have to also be a strengths finder. And I think this all ties back into, you were talking before about how important relationships were, right? And relationships are being the key to this. Well, I think great coaching is always about building a relationship that can bear the burden of truth, right? That's what you're always doing. And so it's hard to be a truth teller on day one. You have to build those relationships and that trust and that understanding, and help, whether it's your athletes or your head coach or your assistant coaches, if you're the head coach, that I'm in this for you. And when you do that, then you can tell the truth, and you'll be respected for it.
That's brilliant.
See, Jerry, I should have asked John right off the bat. I should have asked John that question. He put it together better than I rambled on for like 7 minutes, and he just put it all together.
It's 200 podcasts. I've listened to a lot of people way smarter than me. So love it. Awesome. Well, we want to be respectful of your time here, Ron, and we've really appreciated that. Jerry, did you have any final questions for him? And then Ron, we'll give you the last word of final thoughts. But Jerry, anything from your end?
No, I'm just beside myself, over the moon here, having had the opportunity to do this with you, Ron. And you know, I've been a fan of yours for years and followed your career, and always appreciated the work you were doing. And I notice a lot of what you do from a distance. Some memories I have are being in the huddle and you walking around the circle on the outside and putting your arm around somebody, and then going back to the other side, giving someone a pat on the butt or a pat on the back. And this is what you're doing behind the scenes. This is the stuff that no one tells you what to do, but you have this innate, intuitive sense about how to build relationships. And when I feel a hand on my shoulder, or a compliment, I'm going out on that court, I'm going to get more out of myself because of that. And so I do think you're brilliant, and not so much the tactical, although you're considered one of the most amazing defensive coordinators in the sport. But I want to also say that the relationship game is what I notice about you, and I want the listeners out there to know that here's a man, Ron Adams, who's had a job for many years, and building relationships, and that's where I want to leave it.
Well, thanks for your kind words, Jerry. That was very nice of you to say. I just want to end on a positive note about this whole thing. Vern Gambetta, who I had worked together with in Canada years ago. I was connected with Vern from a friend in Australia who Vern works with his club. And so this fellow put Vern and I together. Vern and I talked for a couple hours in the park over by the arena a couple months ago. And he connected me then with Wade Gilbert at Fresno State, and I had a nice exchange with him. And then Jerry was on the list, and I've had great exchanges with Jerry. And I bring this up because it was such a delightful new world for me, to put it, I guess, in simple terms. These brilliant guys, Vern's just a wonderful guy, and he's also Swiss Italian like me, also. So this was a real joy.
Oh boy!
Just opening my life to all those various worlds. It was wonderful. It's been a real blessing for me, and a real joy. And so I would be remiss if I didn't mention Vern's name and Wade, and putting me in a slightly different world.
Coattailing on that, Ron, you also told me in one of our lengthy, wonderful conversations that this is a time in your life at 73 where you are totally open to meeting people, and that's the life learner in you. And when you're ready, the teacher appears. Not that I'm a teacher, you're a teacher, we're all teachers, and we come together. I'm a learner for life. John's a learner for life. You're a learner for life, and we all seek people. And when you say what you said to me, it's like, you better fasten your seatbelt, buddy, because things are going to happen, and people are going to come on your radar screen left and right. And you're just beginning. And it's like, once you're open to that with the humility and the openness and the vulnerability that you demonstrate, people are going to be attracted to that, and they're going to want to be in your life too. So,
Gary, I needed you 50 years ago.
Well, that song, you and I talked about that song, and I sent you a copy of it. I was so much Bob Dylan song. I was so much older then. I'm younger than that now, right?
That's for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, great stuff. And we just had Vern on the podcast here as well. And he, I think he might've given you a shout out as well at that time. So there we have it. So,
Full
Ron,
circle.
Thank you so much for being on. This was really great. In 200 episodes, we covered a lot of ground today that we haven't really covered before. And so thank you so much for your time and your wisdom and your generosity here this week.
Well, my pleasure. Nice meeting you, John.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you.